Greetings. Welcome to our next session together. Today we're going to be looking at the first part of Genesis chapter 19. So verses 1 through 16, we'll say. Go ahead and pause the video and read that either out loud or to yourselves in your groups. Okay. Now, as you may have noticed, this story is not PG, and so I guess this is a bit of a disclaimer in whatever situation that you're watching this. If there's little ones around, you might want to listen to the whole thing first and make a decision as a parent on that, or just take heed of the warning. We're going to be talking about a few things in this chapter that are obviously quite awful and quite depraved. But Scripture it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty clear on this, and so we're not going to dance around it. We're just going to deal with it as Scripture does. So, as usual, I'm not going to talk about everything here. There'll be plenty of things, I imagine, in your groups that I want you to discuss that come up. But as we go through and look at the first, say, 16 verses, I'm just going to mention some things that stand out or that I think are pertinent to the understanding of this passage. Now, if we recall from the previous chapter, it ends very abruptly and very strangely. There's this sort of negotiating that Abraham is doing with God, as far as he's negotiating the salvation of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, not just for his family, but all of the people. And that negotiation just comes to an end. He gets him down from, if there's 50 righteous, he gets him down to 10, and then it just stops. And so we're left at the place where I think, at least the sense that I get is, well, there's not even 10 righteous. And arguably, maybe there's not even one righteous, at least righteous enough. And so from this passage, and if we recall, there were 3 angels or 3 men or one God flanked by 2 angels that appear as men, something like this, that show up with Abraham. But if we look at the very beginning of Genesis 19, it says, the 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening. And so now it begs the question of what happened to the third, or what happened to the personification of the God figure, perhaps, because now we're just down to 2. And that's kind of a fascinating thing to note. Something else I do want to mention here. When Scripture talks about angels, I want you to understand that angel refers much more to a function or to an office than it does sort of a race of beings, if that makes sense. So the traditional understanding of angel is that of a messenger. Okay, they're from God, and again we've talked a bit about the concept of the divine council, that there are many players that are called various things that God employs. Some of them are on his team, you could say. They are obedient to him, and some of them are not. We like to immediately classify all those as angels, and in some respect that works in terms of their function. But in others, we're probably and likely talking about bigger players than what we often understand as just angels. Okay, so I want to throw that out to you, and you can discuss that a bit more. Now it says here, the 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. What's the significance of him being at the gate? Well, that was where matters of the city would have been dealt with. So legal matters, any kind of dispute or anything of that nature, the sort of the elders or the rulers of an area would position themselves during certain times at the gate, to deal with these kind of issues, but also to deal with foreigners coming in, right? And any kind of either concern or any kind of issues that have to be addressed right away. And so Lot greets them. Now, if Lot is in that position, we find later that some of the other people of Sodom seem to think that he might be living there, but he's not really one of them. So you get this sense that like he's trying to fit in. He's even trying to have sort of a leadership role, but they also don't really accept or recognize that role from him because he's a foreigner, he's an outsider, and he was sort of always regarded as that. But we'll get to a bit more of that later. He rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And he said, "My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early in the morning and go on your way." They said, "No, we will spend the night in the town square." Lot is recognizing that these, call them men or whatever, these angels, that they are something different than just travelers. They're more than just mere men. And he recognizes that. He bows to them, and he is very hospitable. Now notice the phrase there again. We saw this in 18. Abraham did a similar thing. He said, "Wash your feet." Again, this is an invitation of hospitality to come and stay. And he is encouraging them to come to his house. And they inform him of their plan to sleep in the square. And then, of course, well, what do we see here? In verse 3, he made it very clear that they ought not sleep in the square, that was not going to be a good thing for them. And so he offers then, it says that he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread. Again, similar sense of hospitality that Abraham was giving. If we recall from last time, Abraham slaughtered a calf and he had his wife make an enormous amount of bread. We talked a bit about that and how odd sort of that was. But here, again, hospitality he is showing. He's welcoming them in. He's also serving to protect them. We're going to see that a bit more as it develops. In verse 4, but before they lay down, it says, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people, to the last man, surrounded the house. So they were watching, they were paying attention. They knew that these two men, these foreigners, came into the city and that they are being housed at Lot's house. And so, and they called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we might know them." Okay. Whenever scripture talks about knowing, this is experiential knowledge. This is shorthand for sexual intimacy. Adam knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore a son. Right? That's how scripture talks about knowing. This is okay. So let's deal with the problems here and really the sinfulness here. Obviously, and this is of course from the namesake we get the concept of sodomy, and that is something that is obviously very clearly laid out as sin and as wrong here in scripture, but also elsewhere. And this is, it's derived obviously from this event of this name. Now, a couple things about this city as we talk about this. It's not like everywhere else around this area was good and Sodom and Gomorrah were bad. There was so much wickedness all over the place. And that was evidenced by even the finding of of brides. We see that a bit later for Isaac. Do not get a bride from this certain region. Go well beyond that. because of the wickedness of the people, and it was rampant. But there was something about Sodom and Gomorrah that was especially heinous in the eyes of God. Okay, now, so what we're seeing here is, of course, the sexual depravity, and that is absolutely the problem, or a big part of the problem. What seems to be at the core of this is there is the use of sexuality to exhibit force and control. Okay, so what we're likely dealing with here, and again, this is not to say that just the sin of sodomy is more than that is obviously evil. God makes that very clear. Specifically with that, there is something about a male taking on the role of a female in that dynamic and in that relationship. There's something, again, that in Scripture, there's something about that is especially heinous. Also, what we notice in this culture here, or at least the cultural dynamic that is apparent, is that every male in the city, from old to young, what was happening here, and what was especially awful, was that sexuality was being used to control and to establish sort of a dominance hierarchy, but in a awful and abusive way. Not that different from modern day. If you did a study, and this would disgust you, and it should, but if you did a study on like modern day prisons, you would find a similar sort of microculture or structure of sort of a hierarchy that was based on male abuse of other males, and that's just something that is a level of depravity that is apparent here, that sort of has come to the surface. So yes, it is about sexual sin, but more so, God is especially angered and disgusted when sexuality is used as a tool of control and abuse, because we know that God designed sexuality. It was his idea. A husband and wife was a magnificent thing. It was such a magnificent and powerful thing that he had to put it within the bounds of a covenant. We as humans have perverted that and made that an awful thing. So instead of a place of mutual love and submission and respect and so forth, it has become now, here as an example, it's become a thing that is misused to abuse and to control. So that is something that is so heinous. Even though there was all kinds of sin around the area, this was so ingrained in this culture that the only way to deal with it was for God to bring fire from heaven and consume everything. So let that sink in. This is one of the few places. There's a couple. We saw the flood, of course, but this is quite literally God brings fire from heaven to kill everything and everyone. And so let's continue on here and see. They're calling for these men to be brought out, and Lot says, they called Lot, "Where are the men that came to you this night? Bring them out that we may know them." So Lot went out to the men at the entrance, shut the door after him, and he said, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly." So Lot understands that this is wicked and awful. It seems as if, and we don't know this, but it seems as if he is not partaken in this. We don't really know. We're not told. But he is set up kind of as an outsider, and he is saying that this is wicked. And of course, yes, it is. He's recognizing that this is wicked, but then immediately look at what he says. Now, this is just inconceivably awful. He says, "Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you, and you do with them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. He is willing to trade his daughters for the protection of these men, these angels. That is unimaginably awful. I can't even fathom the level of depravity. I in a situation, not that I hope to ever find myself in any sort of situation like this, I would rather, as a father of girls, I would rather go and fight and die. And maybe I could take a few of them with me, than potentially offer my daughters for the use of something so horrible. So that is the level of depravity here. And again, when you think, in the previous chapter, Abraham is arguing for the staying of God's wrath of this place for the sake of a few righteous. And it's like, is this one of the righteous? Because he's not looking so good. Not looking so good here. Not at all. And now something else that's fascinating that we see come out here. Lot is trying to protect these angels of God. Let that sink in a little bit. He's trying to protect them. These are the two that have showed up to destroy the city, to kill everything. And Lot is scrambling, sort of trying to protect them. It's humorous when you look at it like that, because of course they don't need any protection. They need zero protection from Lot. Now, what ends up happening here is, but they said, stand back. And they said, this fellow came to sojourn, and he has become the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. Then they pressed hard against the man Lot and drew near to break down the door. So they already are treating, and they see Lot as an outsider. Like, you've come in here, you're not one of us, and you're trying to judge us. And they're so upset by that, they're going to abuse him as well. And they're even pressing in to break down the door. So they're going to physically enter his house, his dwelling place, to do whatever they want to with him and the angels, the men there. It says, but the men reached out their hand and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And then they struck the men with blindness, that they were at the entrance of the door, both small and great, and they wearied themselves groping to find the door. So again, you see this power displayed by these men, these angels. They strike these wicked men with blindness, so that they can't even find the door that they're trying to break down. So again, it's kind of humorous, because Lot's trying to protect them, and they obviously do not require his protection. Then the men, this is of course referring to the angels, said to Lot, do you have anyone else here, sons-in-laws, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of this place. Okay, so here he's giving them an invitation, giving Lot an invitation to pick who lives and who dies. Basically, right? Is there anybody else? Anyone who belongs to you? Anyone perhaps that you are connected to? Anyone you can vouch for, related to you, about to be related to you by marriage? Now here says, for we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against this people has become so great before the Lord. The Lord has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters, up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting. They thought he was joking. They thought it was a joke, right? Again, I'm reminded of the whole issue with Noah. It's like, how do you think people around Noah would have reacted? Like, oh, God's going to send a flood, destroy everything, Here, God's going to send fire from heaven, or these angels here that are with us now are urging us to leave because they're going to kill everything. And they think he was joking. They didn't take him seriously. Again, you see this picture that, yes, Lot was there in the city and obviously affected and corrupted by it, but he was not one of them. They really, these men, I guess, were going to marry his daughters, but they didn't even believe him. They thought he was just joking. And then verse 16. Excuse me, 15. As morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, Up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city. So there is this urgency because the clock is ticking, right? The judgment is coming. It's on the way. And they better get out before it hits. And so they're encouraging him, get your wife, get your daughters. It doesn't seem like they have any time to pack. We just have to leave. But he lingered. Why? Why did he linger? I don't know. He was comfortable there. This is what he knew. He had made it his home. There's all sorts of things we could talk about his lingering. And really, on a practical side, do we linger in sin? Do we linger when God's like, get out of this situation, get away from this, and we just kind of, like his sons-in-laws didn't take him seriously, but he's not taking this seriously either, it seems, or not as seriously. And then this last portion here that we're going to look at, this is magnificent. But he lingered. So the men seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him. And they brought him out and set him outside the city. They had to physically drag him out of the city so that he would be spared. Him and his wife and his daughters. Sometimes the grace of God is so fierce in our lives that we might be in the city, but we do not belong to the city. And God is pulling us out, kicking and screaming. And I can tell you that there have been plenty of times when God has, in effect, done this with me, where maybe I'm lingering in something, and God is, it seems like he is just physically pulling me out. He is closing doors, and he is pushing me in a direction. He is dragging me along, and I might be protesting it, even though I know that this is the right path and the right way. I'm reminded of, oh goodness, this is from, I want to say The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, but it's not that. This is from an old epic tale, where there's this captain of a ship, and the title and author have escaped me, but there's a captain who he is directing this ship, and they have to navigate through waters where there's a lot of rock outcroppings, and it's kind of a dangerous place where he has to take the ship through. And then of course there are mermaids, right? There are sirens that are singing on these rocks, and they are enchanting the sailors to come toward them. And what they're trying to do is really to get them to wreck on the rocks and drown and die. But it's this sort of sweet calling, this sort of this attractive whatever that they're trying to get the captain and the men to veer off the course, and so that they will be destroyed. They'll be shipwrecked. And the captain instructs his men to wad up, I don't know, cloth or paper or something, and stuff it in their ears so they cannot hear the singing. And he tells them ahead of time that he is going to lose his mind, that the listening of the sirens, is going to cause him to go crazy, to go insane. And he instructs his men to tie him to the mast until they are past this area. And that's kind of a beautiful picture of realizing that we can be tempted by certain things, and knowing that if we give in, it will be to our destruction. And so when we have to navigate certain things in our life, it's almost as if God is pulling us through that. And there will be a time when we are kicking and screaming, and there'll be a time when we have to be tied to the mast, and we have to stay the course. And hopefully we have those around us who are willing to do just that. That you can tell them, hey, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to go insane for a moment, but it's going to be okay. And so do not listen to my orders when I am not in my right mind. Just stay the course, and then get past this to avoid destruction. And that is, much of what is happening here, this salvation of God that is so fierce that it is dragging Lot and his family out of this situation before it gets destroyed. And that's a magnificent picture. It's magnificent that God would do such a thing. And we might go kicking and screaming sometimes, but God, as a good father, knows what is best. And if we knew what he knows, we would trust him and we would go with him willingly. But even when we don't, he pulls us along. And that's magnificent. So as usual, I'll be praying for you. I wish you well in your studies and your discussions. Thank you.